I think you're really going to enjoy this edition of In the Trenches with Dave Lapham, brought to you by First Star Logistics, because it is the genius of Pat McInally who is visiting with us today. And Pat McInally is unbelievably intelligent and unbelievably athletic. He might be the best combination of athleticism and intelligence that I've really been around. And there's a lot of examples of it. We're going to be talking about those. I think you're going to like all of it. Thanks once again for joining In the Trenches with Dave Lapham, brought to you by First Star Logistics. And you're going to be very glad you did, because our special guest today is the legendary, iconic Pat McInally, who, in my opinion, is the definition really of academics and athletics, and maximizing academics and athletics to its fullest potential. Because, man, what a life this guy has led, because he is top shelf in both categories. What's up, my man?
Hey, just excited to be out here. Not as hot as England, but we're in the 90s, 95. What is it out there?
It's in the 90s. Yeah. Okay. We're looking at mid 90s are good. And the humidity off the Ohio River, the humans are pretty high. The humans are hanging off the trees, basically.
Well, we can talk about the climate change, for the next 30 minutes.
Really. So Pat McInally, I'll tell you what, the athletic achievements, you obviously went to Harvard, and you were the New England Player of the Year, the Bulger Award, for the best player in New England, and All-American in 1974 as a wide receiver. But let's talk about your athletic career before that, because didn't you, as I recall in conversations with you, didn't you get a scholarship from UCLA when John Wooden was coaching at UCLA? Your football prowess, obviously, but how about basketball? How about beach volleyball, where you're competing with Olympians? Tell us about your athletic endeavors in your younger years.
Well, basketball was my primary sport. Actually.
Really?
Other than kicking, I had a good career in high school, particularly kicked a couple 49-yard field goals, so way ahead of my time. The record was like 52 in the pros then. So, wow. But really only made all league in football, but basketball I was all CIF state, so averaged 23 and a half rebounds, 39 in one game, which I'm very proud of. And even my son is proud of those things. Nothing to do with football, but basketball. So yes, I went up and played with Bibby and Rowe. It was at Pauley Pavilion when they had never lost a game, for 15 years. So it was very exciting. And then the football coach was Tommy Prothrow.
Yeah.
So, I had to choose between the sports. Obviously, I was being recruited with David Myers, who was Wooden's last captain. I had played in all-star games with him in basketball. So it would have been and the only time I ever regretted going to Harvard was every year in the NCAA tournaments when UCLA kept winning them. So, and we were trying to win the Yale Bowl against Yale. So that was the only frustrating thing. But I think I made the right decision, obviously, and got you for a roommate. So what more could I ask for?
How about that? Oh, how about the Yale Bowl? Wasn't there a 46-yard pass that only passed you through that year? It was a 46-yard pass against Yale that was a big deal in beating Yale in time for the Ivy League title.
Yeah, that was we waited 4 years. I was quarterback in high school, so they didn't use it till the last game of my career, which was great. I got to tell you the funny thing about that Yale game. So we took the lead with like 15 seconds left, and so I had to kick off. And I had the old square toe. Yep. And, I remember I kicked, 15 out of 45 for the year through the goalposts, at that time it was 70 yards or something. So anyway, I go and I kick off, and I missed it so bad. And we had been penalized 15 yards for celebration. I kicked it all the way to the end zone with a spiral, with a square tip too. The guy was so shocked, he just let it hit and go for a touchback.
Oh man, that's classic. That is
And
classic.
part of the reason Mike Brown drafted me was because we were at the Hula Bowl and I was kicking off like 80 yards. There was like a 90-mile-an-hour wind. I guess he wasn't taking that into account. Anybody kick off that far, but it was a 90-mile-an-hour wind hurricane. So that's when they decided to take me. So
And that was at your back, obviously. You
Oh,
were kicking
yeah.
into that back.
yes, I would have got 9 yards into it.
Oh, that's unbelievable. That's great. So and talk about the beach volleyball. I mean, you were an outstanding beach volleyball player. Weren't you playing against Koch Karai and people like that?
Yes, I was quite humbled. It was very good for me. I'd played a few of the open tournaments before coming back for camp. It got me in great shape, but I would play great and lose 11-2, 11-2, 11-1. I had no chance, but to see those guys up close is just unbelievable. But that was when I was playing, and it was very deep sand in Laguna Beach, and I had the highest vertical. I beat like 5 other guys by an inch for the vertical jump. But going out the AstroTurf or spinny,
Yeah.
after that sand was like boom, it was like a diving board. I just sprung. So that was one of my proud moments.
Oh, no question about it. So Harvard, you decided to go to Harvard. What other options did you have? And obviously the academics swayed your decision big time to go to Harvard.
Well, I was going to go to Stanford. They were recruiting me, but I had heard rumors that John Ralston, the head coach, was going to leave and go, and he did leave, and he went to the Denver Broncos.
Right.
And ironically, I later had him in the Senior Bowl. So he was the pro coach for the Senior Bowl. And I remember, it's funny you mentioned the Lowe Award, New England Player of the Year, which was a big thing. I think had one other Harvard guy ever or something, because Boston College dominated it.
Right.
But so I asked him if I could go back to get the award. And by the way, we got a Rolex watch for winning that award. So
Sweet.
It's pretty cool. I asked him if I could leave. I wouldn't miss a practice. I would just go out and fly out that night, come back the next morning. And he said, "Who cares about that little New England award?" He really did. So I don't want you to go to that. That's a waste of time. But I did. And he still started me. So he was cool about it. But yeah, there wasn't like any great respect for New England football, as you know, compared to the big conferences.
Right. But you were All-American receiver in 1974. I mean, as well as your punting prowess. I mean, you made some big plays for the Cincinnati Bengals as well as a wide receiver. So you're at all-around athletic ability. But so that the academics of Harvard and Joe Restick was the head coach, correct?
Yes.
And he was legendary. He had been there for a long time and had tremendous success at Harvard. Did you consider playing other sports at Harvard?
I actually went out there and stayed with all basketball players. James Brown, who big announcer, with television now. He was the number 1 recruit in the entire country.
Really?
Coming into Harvard. We had 4 or 5 All-Americans. They were really building a program. The assistant coach was K.C. Jones before he became the head coach of the Celtics.
Wow.
So, and I only talked to Restic for maybe 20 minutes. I spent all 3 days playing basketball.
Really?
In the indoor athletic building, the IAB. I thought it was the worst gym I'd ever been in, and I thought it was the intramural gym. It ends up it was the varsity gym. It's at 1200. But now they had a tremendous program. Paul Westphal, remember the great player?
Sure.
He used to come, and Celtics would come and play with this group of guys. So I got to play a lot with Paul Westphal. It was fun.
So, man.
The only reason I didn't play.
James Brown, JB, the legendary JB. Yeah. He was the number 1 recruit in the country and went to Harvard, huh?
For sure.
Wow.
I saw articles, Lefty Drysdale, you remember the coach at Maryland? And,
oh, yeah.
But Wooden wanted him, and Floyd Lewis was the other big guy of the year, both in the Harvard Hall of Fame my year. And he was a forward center. And he was like the number 2 recruit. I'm telling you, it was amazing what Harvard was trying to put together. But James got, like he says, he got worse every year, as a basketball player. But he did so much and was into so many things and wouldn't have traded it for anything. And then ironically became a football announcer.
It's crazy.
They were the first 2 black announcers with Danny Jiggets, who was a tackle on my team, and James Brown.
Chicago Bears, Dan Jiggets. Yeah. Remember him very well. All right. So talk about one of the other achievements that you had mentally, a perfect score on the Wonderlic. Take me through that. What was that like?
Well, if I recall, the first question was, is 11 p.m. before or after midnight? So that's where it started, but they got progressively more difficult.
Sure.
And I remember the Times scoffing at no big deal that I got a 50. So the publisher of the LA Times and the editor took the test, and they got 20 and 21.
How about that?
They wrote about it. It was, do you remember it? It was.
Oh, definitely remember the Wonderlic intelligence test. Yeah.
And now what's amazing is it never got matched, that 50, when the guys took it twice, for decades now, and agents would prepare them, because it was important for certain positions. And I was lucky to get to work with the Wonderlic family, which was 3rd generation of doing this test. And, my dad had always said that it was some Harvard guy that, paid somebody to say I got a 50. He never believed I got a 50, never. Even when I got a 49 the second time I took it, 10 years later, after all those concussions.
That's right. You said, too many concussions. That's why you missed one. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
No, there's got to be some truth to that. But so do you think that scoring a 50, and I remember you talking about this, did that intimidate coaches, do you think? You're too smart?
Yeah, this is a true story. I went to, of course, I only tell you true stories, but
yes.
I was in the Rainbow Room for an NFL event, and George Young, the legendary general manager of the Giants,
sure, he
was introduced to me, and he immediately said, that 50 cost you big time. Said, we don't like extremes. We don't like low scores, and we sure as hell don't like high scores. So that costs you many rounds. So your parents might be proud, but it hurt you, okay?
Wow, that's crazy. So college all-star, you get drafted by the Bengals in the 5th round, but you're playing in the college all-star game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and you break your leg. I mean, how crushing was that? You missed that entire first year.
I was so happy.
Really?
I don't think I would have made I don't see how I could have made the Bengals that year. So when you go down it, remember they decided to go with Dave Green as punter.
Yep.
And place kicking, which would have saved them money, and that's a good thing. But he didn't know how to have a great year. Then they traded Charlie Joyner, went on to a Hall of Fame career at San Diego, and then Chip Myers they cut. I don't know, but he played that year. So the only guy would have been John McDaniels, all right? Because I'm not going to get ahead of Isaac.
Right.
So, right. But I remember calling Tom Gray, the equipment manager, at like 2 a.m, lying in the hospital in Chicago with this broken leg, and asked him if I could have number 84. And Trumpy delights in that. Of course, they rejected me coldly. It was embarrassing. I don't know. It had to be drug related, I'm sure, in the hospital. They called him in Wilmington.
Oh, that's classic. That's Pat McInally at his best right there. All right. So you got to take us through starting lineup. I know that you had a great run with starting lineup initially with Kenner. Hasbro got involved, obviously purchasing Kenner. And you had a tremendous run kind of Stopped for about now. Hasbro is back in the game. Tell us about starting lineup. Let's go back to the very beginning. How did starting lineup come about? What was the creative process of starting lineup?
Well, we had our condominium for sale up in Mount Adams, which had previously been owned by Johnny Bench, by the way. It was a very cool unit. And so Leslie, my wife's dad, was representing us, a real estate agent. And he brings in this guy, Bruce Stein, who Kenner had stolen from Mattel. He was a brilliant guy. So I'm meeting with him after he purchased it. I sat there. I was just trying to figure out how I could sell him some equipment furniture that we had, like the dentist cabinet. I didn't want to bring him to California. So he started talking to us, and he said, "Oh, you do a lot of stuff with kids, with your call and pat answers for kids, and
right.
And you know what parents want. So why don't you come up with a toy idea?" And I had never even been in a toy store since I was a kid. And so I thought about it and came back, talked to him a few days later with this Dino World. And he looked at me and said, "How many concussions have you had? This is like a horrible idea." I mean, he said, "Let me take you to a toy store." So he took me to a toy store in northern Kentucky. And I was just walking down the aisle, and I saw this bazooka Bill. It was a G.I. Joe, and it had a little definition that he carried the bazooka primarily, but he also carried some ammunition or something. I said to myself, I didn't say to Bruce,
right,
"Wow, everybody knows who Walter Payton is. You don't have to make up some biography of some fictional character." So I went home and I started talking to my wife about it, Leslie, and we both came up with the idea that why not make a 3-dimensional baseball card, basically, and articulated figures. And Kenner was really good. So I was lucky because Kenner was the leader in the field of articulated action figures. They'd done all the Star Wars, huge hit. So I flew out. I called Bruce and said, "I got an idea. Can you set up a meeting?" Expecting to meet a couple of people. Everybody was there. All the vice presidents, an ex-president who's a consultant. And on the way there, I had been staying in the Netherland Hilton. I just stopped in a drugstore and bought a couple packs of baseball cards. So I spent a grand total of $2. And then out of Bruce's office, I stole a little Star Wars figure. That was it. Those are my props. They gave me 20 minutes, and I left 3 hours later.
Wow.
And went back to my hotel room, and 20 minutes after getting to my hotel room, they offered me a lot of money to hold the idea for 2 weeks.
Wow.
It was amazing, So I told them that I would fly with Bruce to New York the next week. So that was on a Friday. On Monday, we fly to New York, and we meet with football, baseball, and basketball. Just so happens that my friends and teammates and classmates at Harvard were the legal counsels at football and baseball. So I was protected, but what are the odds of that, right? So
no question.
But what was funny about it is that everybody went crazy for the idea, including the meeting at Kenner. But like 20 minutes later, they're all saying, "How could we not have thought of this?" Which are always the best ideas, right? The most obvious.
Exactly.
So we got all that done. We got the preferred royalty rates from the NFL, and they all fell in those 3 days. And then it took 6 months to get the unions, which we have quite a history with the union, if you remember.
Yes.
So it was true. They literally took all the sculptors in the whole country to develop, because they were forced at that time to do like 5 players per team. And so it tested higher than any toy in the history of Kenner. It's just the charts. But what they didn't foresee was that instead of 100 people buying 1 or 2, they'd have 2 or 3 people buying 50. But the numbers were still great. I mean, it did over 700 million in sales.
That's amazing.
In years.
That's amazing. And so took a little pause, but some big news. Starting lineup returns, correct?
Well, that's what's amazing. So when Hasbro turned Kenner into just a toy line,
Right.
they asked the 3 guys that were running starting lineup to move to Providence, Rhode Island, Hasbro's home, and they wouldn't come. So Cincinnati, right now they're not leaving Cincinnati. So so they let it go, and I always I was appreciative. Believe me, they've done a lot for us.
Sure.
But I always wondered why it was our idea. And, we got the licensing because it went on to be very successful for like McFarlane, a couple of companies. But so then I get a call out of the blue, like 6 months ago, a guy named Matt Ross from Hasbro. And he said, would you like well, first of all, we got to contractually get get you involved again in royalties and all that, but because it's your idea. After 21 years, Dave, they're bringing it back on 9/22/22, and it's huge. But now they're doing just the top players in the 3 sports, and then maybe they'll do some special people, in tennis or whatever. So it's so exciting. They are combining with Fanatics. They have all the rights to everything, and it's going to be. It is so exciting. This guy Matt Ross is just a genius and great at this, and this company is really fired up about it. So I have to limit what I can say because they've only announced the launch date, and they haven't. Right. I just talked to them. So, but I'm excited, and just out of the blue is amazing.
September 22nd, starting lineup part 2.
Yes.
The gift that keeps on giving for Pat McInally.
I thought you could delight in that one. That's
absolutely. That's
after 21
incredible.
years.
Oh, that's incredible. It tells you that's how great an idea it is, though. I mean, the simpler idea are the great ones, and it's generational. I mean, it's going to be around forever, I think. But whatever, because there'll always be a turnover of athletes. I mean, there's always going to be great athletes that come and go, and it's quite an idea, amazing idea by Pat McInally for sure. All right, what about your ability as an author? Like you talked about your column that was syndicated across the country. Of course, started out with the Inquirer, but it was all over the country. And then you wrote a book based on your best columns, right? I mean, that was a big hit, big success as well. Talk about that. How'd you get started in that, Pat?
Well, there was an editor. Remember George Blake?
Yep.
And he's about 6'6" and 3/4. He was a 1/4 inch shorter than me. I always reminded him. But anyway, they when we went to the Super Bowl, they had me do a diary, and about the experience. So that was my first writing ever professionally. And then, I went in and said to George's office, and I didn't really know him personally. I just, knew he was the editor. So I went in and I said, look, there are parents out there, they have so many questions, and they need guidance, about injuries, about gaining weight, losing weight, playing multiple sports, on and on, when to lift weights, when to start football. I said, I think it'd make a great column, weekly column. So I'd like to do that. And he said, who are you? Who are you to write? I mean, he was abusing me. And so I eventually, he said, okay, $50. And then I remember Kenny asking me with Chris one day, Collinsworth, how much are you getting paid for doing this column? I said, well, $50. And he said, why would you do that? That's like crazy. I said, because I believe that I'll get paid 100 times $50 when I syndicate it. Well, after only 3 weeks, I got the Chicago Tribune.
Yep.
And I got the Boston Globe. And immediately that gave me great legitimacy. And I was really lucky, Dave. There were so many physical therapists and orthopedic doctors, psychologists. People wanted to, if there was a jock from Harvard that could, address these issues with kids, for parents with kids, then they wanted to help. So I had so many people that were helping me as resources. So eventually we went to, I got 36 papers on my own. And then we went to King Features. George set me up with King Features, which is a big syndicate. And I retained all of them, 90% of what I got paid for. And then they did the next 100 or 90. So we ended up 125. It was amazing.
Wow.
Very successful.
Very unbelievably successful. You've also dabbled in the coaching world. I mean, you coached at high school football for 3 years and had the highest winning percentage in Orange County. Talk about that experience. Talk about how you influenced the lives of young people in that area.
Yeah, I would never. This was not something I ever would have considered doing, coaching. But I'm sure most of my Bengal teammates are still surprised I even played football. But anyway, but my son was a quarterback, and their offense comprised of just pitching the ball back and leading through the hole at quarterback. And he was a drop back passer. So I decided, after his freshman year that I would coach. I'd be head coach, but I didn't want to coach him. I wanted to keep him as my son. So I was very fortunate. I got this guy named Ryan O'Hara, who was an Elite 11 quarterback, and full ride to Arizona. And he played in the Final Four that same year as he started a quarterback. And he was the offensive coordinator and quarterback coach. So I never had to coach him. And I was so lucky. I knew this guy was great. He is now the quarterback's coach at Florida.
Wow.
So he did a great job training my son and Jack, and he threw like 60 touchdown passes his last 2 years.
Wow.
He just did great. So then, we just had some great athletes. We had this little 5'4" slot. He claims 5'5", and he was a 4-year starter at Division III and all conference. 5'5", 5'4",
Wow.
whatever. He was. So maybe we weren't such good coaches. We had some good players, is what I'm saying. Small Christian schools, we love it. So I ended up doing, 6 years there, and then 3 years at Calvary Chapel, where my son Jack is now the head coach, and I'm coaching the Frosh Soft. But it all comes back to. It all started with I have my playbook still, Bill Walsh, that passing game, and that's what we use. Because same thing, we we couldn't match up with the Steelers. We had to out finesse them, out think them, and that's pretty much the basis of our offense. Bill Walsh.
So it's the West Coast offense, huh?
Yeah.
Interesting. So, how big a fan are you of the current Cincinnati Bengals? Do you still keep track of the Bengals in what they're doing?
Oh yeah, we went to the big Bengal Gyms party the night before the Super Bowl.
There you go.
In LA. Oh, my wife dresses still in her Bengal jersey and goes to, and my daughter, and they watch the games every week. It's so much easier to see games now. No, we definitely we love this team. We love Burrow. He's a great player, and what an offense! Huh? Those receivers, you must enjoy.
Oh man,
not that you'd ever be a homer, Dave. I mean,
no, never. So my question is, what do you think of the receivers? What do you think of Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd? I mean, that's as good a threesome as there is in the league.
Oh, definitely. I mean, well, just having Chase to take the top off. You remember that slant he caught, in the playoffs? I still can't believe, he may have been as fast as Isaac, which it was amazing. I still remember Isaac caught that hook against Houston with like 5 seconds left and like a 10-yard catch.
Fourth and four. I got play of the year. I'm like, what the heck?
So no, they have him, and then they're both solid receivers. What did you think about the choice they made at tight end to let him go to New York? And
I mean, obviously they had their from a salary cap structure, they had their limitations, I guess, and he got offered more by the Jets. I'll tell you, CJ Uzomah, it's going to be tough to replace him because not only dynamic on the field, but man, this gentleman a huge leader. I mean, everybody in the locker room, tremendous respect for CJ Uzama. So, you know how that is. I mean, that intangible is a big factor. There's no doubt.
Yeah, see, I don't can they throw that many passes to the tight end? I mean, their wide receivers are so dynamic. I mean,
Right.
one
right.
football.
They picked up Hayden Hurst in free agency to try to, pick up some of that slack as a receiving tight end. He came in the league as a first round pick out of South Carolina, and he's kind of a size speed ratio mismatch guy that they're going to try to. But like you said, when you the tight end, a big part of his job is put your hand on the ground in the running game and be a factor at the end of the line of scrimmage there, and everything else builds off of that. It's going to be interesting. I do think that with the improvements in the offensive line and what they've got going at the skill positions, they haven't reached their potential. I think there's much more room for it. But Super Bowl, what's your take on the Super Bowl?
Third straight game we could have won, huh? That's 3. It's just unbelievable. I always tell people, and I with fear of them thinking I'm bitter about it, but the team of the 80s was, the San Francisco 49ers. They won 4 Super Bowls, right?
Right.
But 2 of them we should have won. Imagine if they had been 2-2.
Yeah.
Instead of 4-0. But tough to beat Montana, I guess. You remember Paul Zimmerman?
Oh, sure.
Z?
Sports Illustrated, the Z, yeah.
Yeah, he took me to dinner the night before the Super Bowl, and I remember, and I liked him, and we were good friends. And I remember he said he was going to he was going to pick the 49ers, and I just said, I can remember still feeling sorry for him. Why would you do that? Your reputation's on the line. We're going to win. And he said, no, it's Montana. And remember the only game we lost that year, the second half of the season, we were 7-1. Was San Francisco.
Yep.
So I guess they were the better team, but
I'll tell you that, like you said, lose a Super Bowl by 5 points, 4 points, 3 points. Those 3 Super Bowls. So it's like closing in on it. But the interesting thing though is wiping the slate clean, and now you're the hunted and you're not the hunter. And as they say today, running it back. Will the Bengals be able to run it back and have a successful season? No team, the first 2 Super Bowl teams, neither one won a playoff game the following year. The following year in the 1981 season, Super Bowl 16 was the strike year.
Yeah.
Work stoppage year. We went 7-2 and lost to the Jets. We had a 17-14 lead, and then they edged us 44-17. Freeman McNeil rushed for over 200 yards. And then the 88 team didn't even make the playoffs. They went 8-8 the following year. They lost like 5 games by 7 points or less, including the last game of the season, which would have gotten them in the playoffs. So my point is to repeat, that success. It's a challenge because you are the hunted now and not the hunter. It's a big difference.
Well, it's a tougher schedule. I don't think, we've had a history of being worst to first to worst.
Yeah.
I think they will have a good year.
I do too.
I really do. I think this is a really solid team, particularly what they did with the offensive line in the offseason. I think they've upgraded that. But, the whole key is, does Burrow stay healthy? That's, to me. Remember that we had some great teams. I remember when Kenny got hurt. Remember the last preseason game?
Yeah.
We came out 0-6. And, we were strong. And by the way, that year we went 7-2, the year after the Super Bowl, the first one. We were the only team to beat the Raiders that whole year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we had a great team. But then, then they managed to lose Forrest. And then guys like you and Chris went to the World Football League or whatever.
USFL. Yeah.
USFL.
Yeah. You're right, though. I mean, the year we went to the Super Bowl in 1981, we were 12-4, 7-2 the following year. That was the best win-loss record combined for those 2 seasons. We were the best team in the National Football League regular season schedule, So,
by the way, on that Kenny, that game against the Jets, when McNeil ran for 200 yards, we were up 14. Do you remember that?
I know I remember being up 17-14. Yeah, we were up 14-3 early. I think.
0, and we drove down to the 10-yard line or whatever, and Kenny threw an interception.
Yep.
I think Isaac turned in instead of out, whatever.
He took it
And
back.
He turned it all the way back,
Yep.
and then we lost. But we
6.
could have gone up 21-0.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, heartbreaking.
Yep. No question. If and buts were candy and nuts, man. So how much better do you think athletes are in today's NFL than when we played?
Well, it's so specialized now.
Yeah.
Linebackers don't play 3 downs anymore, very rarely. And you have I think the specializations made it better, period. The training, the kids, they're so much more advanced when we get them in high school, particularly quarterbacks. They've already gone to private quarterback lessons since they were like 8 years old. And then a lot of these schools actually are tied into the Pop Warner, and they run the high school's offense. They do that a lot in the South, believe me.
Right.
So I think there's a combination. They are bigger, faster, quicker, better trained, but also, they have the superior coaching. And I think the game has changed in favor. I'm sure a lot of people would argue that the defense isn't better, but the offense is so advanced now. All the penalties, everything's, gosh, don't you remember where they had to protect? They changed that rule because they beat Isaac up so much.
The Isaac Curtis rule, yeah.
Yeah, the 5-yard thing, which they don't enforce. But
right.
Yeah, so, but there's no comparison physically. The talent and the coaching that they get now is. I have a crazy stat for you. 2 years ago, there was a modern day high school versus St. John Bosco to win the CIF championship here.
Mm-hmm.
And those 2 high schools combined, how many Division I scholarships players do you think they had on the field that night?
On the field that night?
2 high schools. Now, this is multiple years. They have freshmen that are getting offered now, remember?
Jeez.
How many guys do you think between those 2 schools?
You're talking freshman through senior year, 4 classes of kids.
Yes, that had already received Division I scholarship, multiple Division I scholarships.
I'd say 35.
54.
What?
Yes.
Woo.
And, they had the number 1 quarterback and the number 2 quarterback went to Clemson and Alabama. Wow. And Bryce Young, now the Heisman Trophy winner, he was a junior on that team. Isn't that amazing? Or senior, I guess. He lost to Bosco. But isn't that amazing? 50.
That's crazy. That's crazy. All right, I'm going to get you out of here on this. What's next for Pat McInally? What are you doing? That fertile creative mind of yours never rests. I know that. So you said you're still doing some coaching. Are you still writing? How are you getting that creative genius of yours satisfied?
Well, I'm hoping, since I failed miserably over the last 30, 40 years, to still help parents, with young athletes. Just a lot of the questions are the same questions, and there's a whole new thing now because of burnout and a lot of mental issues. Right. And, like out here, they don't even have 2-a-days anymore. Do they still have them in Ohio? Out here, you can only practice once a day for 2.5 hours.
Yeah, I'm not sure what they have in Ohio. I think it's probably the same. And in the NFL, there aren't really 2-a-days. There's no 2-a-days at any level, really.
So I'm hoping to either podcast, hint, or
yes,
and writing to answer these questions of parents, and there's so many now that I'm out of the ivory tower now because I've been a coach, and to see how so many of these parents handle coaches and the harm they do to their kids is just horrible. When if they were told how to approach these coaches, if they're unhappy with the position he's playing, or the how much he's playing, or just choosing a high school. If you've got no chance, you've got, again, like a Walter Payton in front of you, got some stud, you shouldn't go there if football's important to you. So that's my ultimate goal, and to help kids that not Division I kids. They're already recruited when they're like 12. It's to help kids get into Division III football, or where football is just part of your education. Like, I'm sure you'd go to Harvard now instead of Syracuse, right? No, I mean, it's a different world. You have to think about your future, not just your football. So that's what I'm really interested in doing, is helping parents and helping kids find a way to have football help them get an education and play. And it's so genetic now, So again, I bring up the kid that's 5'4", and we had another kid 5'8", a running back. Another kid that was 5'7". They all had they went to great schools, the Claremont schools out here, got great educations, and they started all as sophomores, and they were so limited genetically, but they could play football.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Adelaide, I got to ask you one more thing. Tell us the story, and this will be it, I promise. Forrest Gregg and Pat McInally had a very unique and great relationship, and you kept everybody loose. And Forrest Gregg was a stickler on wardrobe. When we travel, we had to wear a coat and tie and all that. And he was a stickler with you about, your wardrobe. And tell everybody the story of your decision to retort to what Forrest Gregg had implemented in terms of dress code.
Yeah. So we were going to go out. We were going out to San Diego.
Yes.
My parents live in Southern California in Orange County. So I wore a suit. Usually I wear jeans and whatever. We didn't have a dress code, so I wasn't being a rebel. But so we come to Monday, and I always sat in the very front of the room because he didn't really yell at me that much. I mean, wasn't that important, I guess. So, but after he's yelling at Pete Johnson, I'll never forget his radar eyes focused on me, and I'm like 2 feet away from him, and he says, "And you, McInally, you dress like a, bum when we go to any game, but we go out to San Diego where your parents are, and you wear a suit. Usually, you dress like a damn orphan." He's yelling at me, right? And so we go to lunch, and Turk Schonert and Chris and Kreider, we were all at Roy Rogers. God, you remember that?
Oh yeah. Got to make the run to Roy Rogers.
Yeah. So Turk says, after a few minutes, he said, what's an orphan? I said, well, I think he was trying to say orphan.
Yes.
I'm not sure.
Yes.
So the next day we were in the stadium to have practice and Riverfront. And I'd never been fined. I'd never been late, never done anything, to get fined. And but I show up late because I'm in hiding in the tunnel, and I've got a tux with a cane and a top hat. And I wait like till 10 minutes after practice started, and I walk out. He's really mad. And I walk, because he yelled and told the team, I'm going to find McInally finally now. So I come out and I walk up to him. I said, Coach, I'm no orphan. And he looked at me and just started laughing. I mean, you laughed.
It was great.
Remember? I mean,
it was great.
He goes, you got me, McInally. So that was, and I was lucky because the Inquirer, I had told the Inquirer I was going to do it, and they were there with the photographer, and there was in the paper the next day.
Oh man, the hat, the tails, everything, man. The cane, it was awesome. It was classic. You're the best. Appreciate your time. You carved out quite a bit of it in your day for us, and that's greatly appreciated. Let's do it again.
Yeah, let's, we'll be talking.
Dave Lapham here, and every day I am grateful for my experience to have played professional football. As a player, I realized self-motivation, leadership, and appreciating your teammates are key. At First Star Logistics, you can use those same attributes to create the life you want for you and your family. Build your future by working hard like I did. You'll see results both on and off the field. Call First Star Logistics today and be part of our winning team. Our 1 million YouTube view giveaways contest, courtesy First Star Logistics, continues with a special contest that runs until August 7th, 9 o'clock. So you have plenty of time, but don't procrastinate. Don't wait, because prizes include 2 tickets to a Cincinnati Reds game in the Boone County Bourbon Room with Dave Lapham. That would be me. 2 tickets to Cincinnati Reds game in the Boone County Bourbon Club with a celebrity to be determined later. And I know you're going to like that. It's big time. A signed Dave Lapham jersey. First Star Logistics custom backpack filled with apparel and gear. A $300 value. Very nice prize. 2 $50 gas cards. Want the price of gas today. Nice. To enter, just go to the link and description below or scan the QR code.